We all know the world we live in is run by two primary midas called Chesed and Din. Chesed relates to a type of behavior that's open, it's easy, that the love is obvious. Din results from Chesed. Din doesn't have an existence of its own. However, in a time of Din, when there is Midas Hadin, then a person doesn't feel the open love. The love is covered. And that's all for the sake of Chesed, in order to bring more Chesed into this world. So there are different times in the world, there's different times in a person's life, where these midas interact within him, and they create who he is, they create how he's going to be. They create our relationship with everything, not only with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but even between people, and not only between people, even within people, between people themselves and their own behaviors, people themselves and their own challenges that they go through. There's a relationship that we have with everything. That's our nature. Human beings create relationships with everything they come across. And some of those relationships are dominated by the Midas HaChesed, and others are dominated by the Midas Hadin. But what's the essence of the Midas Hadin? Now that we're standing before Rosh Hashanah, we're trying to understand a little more. What does it mean when we say that there's a Yom Hadin? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Chas v'Sholem angry? We don't want to think like that, obviously. And besides, we know that Chazal demand from us to be happy on the Yom Hadin. And there's psukim to that effect. Ichli madanim ishsim amtakim. Because we know that the one who is in charge of the din, he has our best interest at heart. So whatever the Midas Hadin is going to decide, we're willingly going along with it. So what's the nature of that Midas Hadin? What does it mean? So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created life, life manifested in a way where the physical, which is the reality that our body is inhabiting, has a very close relationship with the spiritual, which is the mind, the thinking capacity of a human being, his ability to perceive and experience. However, the two different realities are not properly synchronized. We know that simply by our own experience, and we know that even more if we look at history, and if we look at the Torah, and if we look at what happened to humanity, we'll see that the mind is not properly synchronized with matter. And so, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order for us to eventually get to our destination, He created within nature different times, different mechanisms that are going to bring the mind closer to reality, so that eventually the mind can contain reality, the mind can understand reality. And every time where there's a reconciliation with reality, we call that a Yom Hadin, or a time of Din, or a mood of Din. Because Din, when it's done appropriately, is not about ruining anything, it's not about causing harm or damage. Adrabah, Din is the restriction of building in accordance with the truth, of building in accordance to reality. And therefore, on Rosh Hashanah, what we're essentially trying to do is we're trying to synchronize who we are with what's real. And this is why we have in the davening, we have Malchus, Zechronis, and Shofris. All three of them are created in order to allow man to come back to reality. So if a person was off on a certain type of trip where his mind was disconnected from reality in such a way that waking him up to reality is painful, so then that would cause him to have a problem with the Midas Hadin. That would cause the Midas Hadin to be difficult for him. But it's not because the Midas Hadin is trying to cause difficulty. Adrabah, the Midas Hadin is here in order to smooth out our experience so that we don't go too far from reality. And this is why we'll see in the davening constantly that the word emes gets inserted in many different places. And for example, we say in the Nesana Toike, we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'hichon b'chesed kitzacho, right? We prepare HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kisei with chesed. V'seishev olav be'emes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits on it with truth. Because the truth is the ultimate goal. If we don't have truth, we don't have nothing. We just have an imagined reality. So no matter how pleasurable something might be, no matter how good it might feel while we're experiencing the imagination, if it's not based on truth, it's not really our friend, because eventually we'll have to wake up to the truth. We'll have to reconcile with the truth. And that's the nature of Rosh Hashanah. And that's also the nature of a human being, that when suddenly he realizes a certain reality that he wasn't aware of, sometimes that could bring him into the Midas Hadin. Sometimes seeing the truth could wake up in a person the Midas Hadin. So the instructions that we have for Rosh Hashanah, the instructions that we have for this experience, is that we want to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean to be Mamlech? It means to recognize that He created everything that He created in perfection. That means being Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu, giving Him the rite of passage, telling Him that we recognize His truth. We know that He is true and we're not, because we can't understand the truth yet. And through that, we can be happy on the Yom Hadin. We say the Yom Hadin is doing us a favor. The Yom Hadin is bringing us closer to Him. It's bringing us closer to the truth. And what is the truth? How do we distinguish the truth from something that's not true? So the key to figuring out what's truth, says the pasuk, Svas emes tikon la'ad. Something that's durable, something that lasts, is true. V'ad argia l'shon shoker. Lies only work while there is a certain problem that needs to be covered by the lies. But eventually, lies fall apart, because the problem that the lie was trying to solve is no longer there, and therefore we don't need that solution any longer. And this we can observe throughout history. Why do different nations come and go? Why do different superpowers rise and fall? It's because there was a problem within society, there was a problem within the world, there was a problem between people, that a new nation had a new idea, a new way of solving that problem. And therefore, all the power started going to that nation. And usually there were strong ideas, philosophical ideas, religious ideas at the basis of a new kingdom, a new superpower. And people will go to that in order to find solutions to their problems. They're always looking for a way out of their problems. However, because these solutions were not the ultimate truth, they fell away. History proved that these ideas were not true, because eventually man outgrew those ideas and those superpowers fell. They came and left, and they're no longer here. And so the purpose of our spiritual tradition, the purpose of the Torah, the way that we received it, is to connect us to a truth that will endure forever. And so we have access to wisdom that's been around for thousands of years. And within that wisdom, there is a kernel of truth, that when somebody finds that truth, then he's connected to the ultimate truth. And these are words that we can say. It's very hard to contemplate what that really means and what it really looks like. Because essentially what we're really talking about is not a Greek philosophical type of way of finding truth, where you argue it out, you speak it over, you hear all the different sides, and you come to a conclusion. That's not true. Truth is a way of experience. Experiencing truth means experiencing life in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended for it to be experienced. That's the nature of truth. And that truth requires a certain type of brain function. First, it requires a certain type of brain development, and then it requires a certain type of brain maintenance, where a person could have the appropriate tools to interact with reality in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended for it to be, in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created it to be. And in order for us to be able to achieve that goal, the Midas Adin gets involved in our reality more strongly, more intimately than for any other nation. Even though our goal is to be moed the Midas HaRachamim, and this is why we see in all our tefillos and everything that we do is to be moed the Midas HaRachamim, but the reason we cling to the Midas HaRachamim so strongly, the reason we're always looking for the Midas HaRachamim is because we got a heavy dose of Midas Hadin. And what does it mean, Midas Hadin? It means we can't run away from reality. We're tied to it. Unless we're going to work it out, it's going to hurt. And this is what happened to us over thousands of years of Golus, that we took such a heavy dose of Midas Hadin that we caused ourselves suffering wherever we went. Our way of thinking, our way of understanding, our way of interacting with life attracted pain. It attracted suffering. Because ultimately, the universe is run by human minds. That's what the Torah is teaching us when it talks about Bechira. When the Torah says, "Ibacharta b'chaim," it doesn't just mean you as an individual should choose to live a good life. It means that the whole world, the whole universe, is relying on you in order to receive its sustenance, in order to be alive. Because the human beings are in charge of everything that happens in this universe. And this is a theme throughout the Torah. In this week's Parsha, we see it quite a bit, where the Torah tells you what will happen in a good scenario and what will happen in not such a good scenario. And we see how it's not only the individual that's affected. All of life gets affected. Starting with the people, moving to the animals, and on to the plants, and finally, even the doimim is affected, because the energy that we create is the energy that gets to interpret all the other energies. And today, with quantum physics and neuroscience and different understandings that science is arriving at, that's really confusing their theories that they've been relying on for so long, they're finally realizing that a human being is much more than they thought he was. Until now, they just looked at a human being like a piece of Lego that's a part of this big building over here. But now they're realizing that a human being is not only alive within his body, he is alive within nature. He's the life of nature. It's like the pasuk says, "Kol hashikra lo yodem nefesh chayo hi shemoy," that everything gets interpreted by the human being. And that's not only for us. That's for the entire universe. Meaning, Kivyochel HaKadosh Baruch Hu interprets life based on how we interpret it. Ad kedei kach that the Zohar says a scary statement. The Zohar says that there would be no punishment for anyone unless a human being created a kitrug. If there wasn't a human being that created a kitrug with his mind, with his mouth, for himself or for others, then there would never be punishment, ever. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Midas HaRachamim. He has no interest in punishing. However, because we are so powerful, because the world runs on us, if we create a kitrug, then we give chomer to the Satan, we give power to the devil. We give power to evil forces. And those evil forces have a real existence in the spiritual world, in the Olam HaMachshava, and they can manifest all over the world, not necessarily close to where the person who said it will see it. It could happen somewhere on the other side of the world. But there's a relationship between the words that were said and the thing that happened. The words that are said are the cause, and the things that happen are the effect. Meaning that human beings are in charge of everything that happens on this planet and beyond. But really what matters is what happens on this planet, because everything beyond happens from what happens on this planet. This is the purpose of how it was created. This is the reason it is this way. And therefore, the Midas Hadin is here to save us from ourselves, so that we can constantly bring ourselves back to reality and remember who we are and how we're supposed to behave. If there was no Midas Hadin, then people would do whatever they want. And people don't really know what they want. And so while they're doing what they think they want, they'll actually be doing the exact opposite of what they want. And this is the reason why within every cycle, whether it's a daily cycle, a monthly cycle, or an annual cycle, there's a Midas Hadin. The Midas Hadin of the daily cycle happens ben Hashmoshes, when it starts getting dark. That's the time of Mincha. That's the time where there's more Midas Hadin in the world. The spirits that have been created by humanity, that are anti-humanity, wake up. And that's when we daven the Tfilas HaMincha. And if we look at the month, at the time when there's no moon, right before Rosh Chodesh, is a time of Midas Hadin. We know people don't get married at that time. The middle of the month, when the moon is the most powerful, is the time when we have the most shefa. We have the biggest, the most powerful energies of that month coming through. And the same thing for the year. In the annual cycle, we have Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a time of din. Rosh Hashanah is a time where it's a new year, and it's a time for us to remember who we are. It's a time for us to reflect. It's a time for us to recognize our power. And therefore, Chazal, the Torah, created for us a cycle of how we're going to get introduced to a new year, so that we can take this opportunity to become more connected to reality, to become more connected to the truth, so that we can remember who we are. When we come into the world, we come in without any information almost. All the information that we have is unconscious, because our capacity to speak, our faculties of thought, are not yet fully developed. So we have no information. And as we go, we start learning information. But usually, the way we learn the information, the stance we take because of this information, cuts us off from everything that happened on this planet prior to our birth. We don't realize that really we're not individuals. We're a continuation of a race, of a nation, of a family that's been in this world a long time before we came. We came in the middle of something. And in order for us to do this right, we have to look back at our origins, we have to look back at our history, we have to look back at what happened prior to our arrival to understand the context of what's taking place, to understand why are we troubled, why are things so complicated, why is life difficult. The answers to these questions are in the past. It's the past that created a society that looks like ours. It's the past that allowed human beings to evolve to the place that they have. It's the past that caused the different philosophies and different understandings of man to get so disconnected from reality. And therefore, we shouldn't take responsibility for a problem that we did not create. We should take responsibility in the sense of trying to help and fix, but we should not take responsibility in the sense of feeling guilty, feeling down, feeling broken. Because not only is that going to ruin our vessel, it's not going to allow us to build, but even more than that, that's going to disconnect us further from reality. Because that's not reality. The problems that we are facing are problems that relate to human existence. They're problems that relate to mankind. They're problems that relate to Klal Yisrael. They're problems that relate to Knesset Yisrael, to the Shechina, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, much more than they relate to us personally. We're just one of the many. But ultimately, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's problem. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who created reality the way that He did, and He allowed for it to come to the place that it did. And we're just the individual soldiers trying to serve a purpose, trying to figure out who to serve and how to do so best. So this is something, as we go into Rosh Hashanah, as we go into the time of Elul, that we have to realize whatever we did wrong, whatever we broke in this world, whatever damage we caused, it's not because we're evil, it's not because we are bad, it's not because there's inherently something wrong with us, but it's because humanity as a whole has not matured enough to understand life yet. And in this sense, we call the sitra achra klippos. What is a klippa? A klippa is a peel. A klippa is something that grows on the fruit in order to protect the fruit so that it doesn't get hurt, so that it doesn't get broken, so that it doesn't get eaten prematurely. And then eventually, when the fruit is ripe, when the fruit is ready, then the klippot can be removed and the fruit can be enjoyed. However, while the fruit's still growing, the klippa is a necessary part of it. And the same goes for us. The same goes for our klippot. The same goes for our dinim, as we adjust to reality and the difficulties that we go throughout our lives as we try to adjust to reality and recognize reality. All these are a necessary part of growth in order for us to arrive at our destination. All these open up the road for ourselves and for the generations to come, so that they can know the truth, so that they can connect to something real and avoid suffering. Because the nature of reality, the nature of the truth, is that it doesn't allow for suffering. The only time suffering comes is when we remove ourselves from the truth. And this is demonstrated in this week's parsha in a lot of detail. That as a person lives with the truth, life will go good for him. He'll enjoy himself. This cannot be said necessarily in the Galus, because there's so many other factors that might take away our peace, that might take away our ability to exist. However, Bizman Habayis, and Bezrat Hashem, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will show himself again in this planet and will be able to live in accordance with the truth, then the truth protects people from suffering. And like we see, when a person brings Bikurim, the Torah tells him, "V'samachta b'chol ha'tov," you should be happy with all the good that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to be happy with the good. That's how you repay him. He gave you so much. If you want to pay him back, be happy with what he gave you. And not only should we be happy, the Chasidic talk about that the pasuk says, "V'lekachtem reishis kol pri ha'adama, v'samtu batene." Tene means a basket. So the Svarim say Tene is the Rosh Tevis, Tamim, Nekudus, and Oisios. Meaning when something good happens to you, you want to manifest that. You want to create Malachim. You want to speak it out. You want to put it into letters, into words, into a song, into a poem. Because this is how we give glory in the spiritual sense. This is how we make the spirit grow. This is how we develop inside of us the ability to receive more good. By being able to recognize it, by being able to rejoice, by being able to let our guard down, be vulnerable and say, yes, life is good, life is kind, even though we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We believe in life. We believe in the one who created life. We believe in his kindness because we've seen his work. We've seen his edus, like David HaMelech constantly says in Tehillim. The edus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are constantly talking to me. If I see a human being, that's the edus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. If I see an animal, that's another edus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. If I see the sun rise in the morning, that's edus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. When it goes down in the evening, that's again edus that he knows what he's doing. So if we're going to look at the edus, we're going to recognize who he is. We're going to recognize who we're dealing with. And we're going to recognize that all the flimsy ideas, all the flimsy philosophies created by words, all the different books and texts and interpretations of life will never do justice to the one who created life. They can never come close to even describing a tiny piece, a tiny bit of what it means that he created life. And this, if we develop this enough, we should be so taken over by it that this should fuel our entire lifetime. This is how our great-grandparents, this is how the Avos had such tremendous energy. They had the ability to do such tremendous things and stand against all the odds and stand against all the beliefs of the other people and stand against the whole world, basically. Echad hoya Avram, every single person that he knew hated him. Every single person that he knew felt that he was a problem, that he was no good. They would rejoice in the fact that he doesn't have any children, so he'll die and it'll be over. And yet Avram had the energy, had the capacity, had the ability to continue on, regardless of what's happening around him. Because he realized who he's dealing with. And when you compare who you're dealing with against a human being looks like a joke. What is a human being? What does a human mind really know? How can a human mind even assume that it can possibly understand the depth and the wisdom of what's happening in this world, of what was created here, of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought out from nothing into this, into all of it. And the way it's done, if we look around, the trees, the forest, the rocks, the sand, it's huge. There's a lot happening. But how did it all come into being? In absolute silence. Nature works without drama. Nature works without tools. Nature works in the beauty of nothingness, where things just become themselves out of themselves. Just like we became ourselves out of ourselves, there was nothing there, and then there's something, and then afterwards that something becomes somebody, and then afterwards that somebody becomes many things, at least in his mind. All that from nothing. That's the beauty of nature. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu interacts with life. There's quiet. There's nothing happening. And yet, you come back after a while, and there's a whole forest. There's a whole world. There's a whole everything that you've seen, everything that you've imagined, everything that you've experienced. All that out of nothing. That's the nature of life. That's who HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. That's what He's done in order to allow us to experience this. And what He expects of us in return is to stick to Him. How do we stick to Him? By sticking to the reality that He created. Reality is Him. Reality is His will. Reality is how HaKadosh Baruch Hu designated life to be. And people understood this. People understood this very deeply. Today, there's way too many different distractions in our way. Today, our mind hardly has time. Our mind hardly has energy. Our mind hardly has any interest. And that's because we've dried it up with things that are of no real interest to the mind. The only reason the mind's busy with them is for something else that will happen later. And that something else never justifies the past. The past we gave for that something else is gone. And the something else, whether we have it or we don't have it, cannot give us back the past. And therefore we have to make sure that every day of our lives we invest in something real. That we do something in that day that's going to be meaningful to us. It's going to be meaningful to the one who created life, because eventually you and the one who created life are going to merge. You're going to see yourself as the creator of life, and you're going to look back at your life and say, what did I do in this world as the creator of the world? Once you merge back into your makar, once you merge back into the Chaya Chaim, when your neshama becomes Tzrura B'Tzroira Chaim, when you recognize who you really are, when you recognize where you really belong, you're going to reflect back on this experience and you're going to ask yourself, what did I do in this world as an owner, not as an employee? On Rosh Hashanah we say, Hayam Hara Soilam, Hayam Yamed B'Mishpat Kol Yitzurei Elomim, Im Kevonim im ka'avodim. Are you a slave or are you a son? A slave works for Paroi. Paroi likes slaves. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Kili b'nei Yisrael avodim. I don't want you to be slaves. I want you to be mamleches kahanim v'goy kodesh. I want you to be sons. A son sees life the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees life. A son's only interest is to see life from the eyes of the Creator. And that means that he sticks to reality, that he sees what was created, and he removes his opinions from the entire scenario. Opinions are extremely unhealthy for the mind, because the mind cannot tell the difference between an opinion and reality. So when we fill our mind with opinions, we end up acting based on those opinions. They're not harmless. Opinions have real consequences, and they're very dangerous. In fact, all the arguments that happen in this world relate to opinions. There might be opinions about facts, and people might be so convinced that their opinions are right that they think their opinion is fact, yet it's still just an opinion. And we shouldn't have any opinions. We should be living life how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created it. Period. End of story. What we don't know, we don't know. What we verified, we know. And we have no opinions about anything else. When we build our life on our opinions, then we can be certain that we're moving away from reality. And then, when the Zman of Din will come, when reality will rear its head, when it will be time to wake up, we'll notice that our opinions were our enemies. They're not necessary. They don't help. Even if we have to have an opinion to do some type of an action, if we don't know what to do and we want to decide what to do, we need to discard that opinion as soon as that event is over, not to carry it around. People have so many opinions about themselves and about life and about other people that as long as they stick to those opinions, there is no chance that they will ever see the truth. It's not possible for a mind steeped in opinion to recognize the truth, to see reality for what it is. And every generation has different opinions, and every generation finds different subjects to have opinions about. And people argue over their opinions morning, noon, and night. And people feel like if you don't agree to their opinion, then you've offended them individually. Some people be ready to start an argument right then and there if you just don't agree with their opinion. And so, the Yemei Adin is a time for us to wake up from our opinions. It's a time for us to wake up from what we think life is, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has something much better in store. We've tried our way, and it doesn't work. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking from us, see it how I see it. See the truth. Idvorcha emes v'kaim la'ad. The reason we can speak about these things still today is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so true that those who saw the truth then, thousands of years ago, know us better than we know ourselves now. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's word is emes, idvorcha emes, v'kaim lo'ad. It stays forever, emes. The truth stays forever. And it's our relationship with it that needs to be strengthened. The reason we have Rosh Hashanah is so that our mind, our spirit, our neshama can reconcile with the truth. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us all, that we should be able to open our eyes, we should be able to see life for what it is. We should be able to develop those areas in our brain that are necessary so that we can have chayas, so that we can have pleasure from the spiritual. And it should give us the ultimate geula.
Yeah, when you said when someone, you said a certain word, and you said when someone thinks this thing.
Opinions?
No, before that, you said this is a very harmful thing. Just by doing it, it can cause harm. very harmful thing.
Kitrug.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Okay, so it simply means when you say something negative about yourself or others, or if you believe something negative. As soon as a person believes something negative about himself, he's giving the Satan, whose job it is to be Mekatrig, he's giving him material. And you can be certain that he's going to use that material to the best of his ability. Speech, thought, anything emanating from a human being can cause harm to a human being and to other human beings, because all the energy that the Satan has to interact with life comes from human beings. He didn't have any energy from life itself. So when we give him energy, we're building his power. And then he uses that power to harm us. Understand?
So it's sort of like the snake.
The snake is metaphorically saying how he even got his foothold into the human brain in the first place. Because through Chava he got into Adam, but basically he somehow managed to come into the human experience, and since he's been in the human experience, he makes sure that we don't forget him. Because if we all forget him for 1 second, then he's gone. He's never coming back.
Right.
Understand? So he's holding his place. He's not paying rent, he's taking rent. Even though he's the one that's living in our brains.